Good morning. Here we are on day 259 of our 365 days with the scriptures. At the moment, we're looking at the parables of Jesus, and today we come across someone who is far more ruthless than he should have been. Matthew chapter 18, verses 23 to 35. Jesus is saying, "So, the kingdom of the heavens is similar to this man, this king, who wanted to audit the accounts of his employees. So he started to do that, and one was brought to him that owed him 10,000 talents, which he was unable to repay. So his boss ordered him to be sold as a slave, along with his wife, his children, and all his property, to recoup that debt. At which the servant got down on his knees and said, 'Can't you put your anger aside for a while? I'll get the money for you, all of it.' His boss was filled with tenderness, released him, and wrote off the debt. But that same employee, just as he was leaving his boss, bumped into a fellow worker who owed him just 100 denarii. He grabbed him by the throat and said, 'Pay up now.' His fellow worker fell to his knees and asked him to have patience, and he would get the money, but he refused to wait and had him put in prison until the debt was paid. But his fellow workers saw it all and were very upset. They reported his behavior to their boss, who sent for him. He said, 'I didn't realize what a wicked employee you were. I wrote off your debt entirely when you asked me to. Shouldn't you have been merciful too? Shouldn't you have done the same for your fellow worker as I did for you?' Angrily, his boss handed him over to the prison officers until he paid back all he owed. That is how my heavenly Father will deal with you, unless you learn genuinely to forgive others." The big danger with law-based religions, including the faith of those Christians who mistakenly believe that Christianity is a faith that believes your obedience and good behavior will win you some merit in God's eyes, is the conviction that every crime and misdemeanor will have to be paid for by the individual that committed it. So they try to save souls by making people pay for their misdemeanors here on earth before they fall into the hands of God on Judgment Day. Little do they realize the real God is like the boss in the parable. He is basically tender-hearted. He knows none of us is perfect and takes that into account so long as we trust him. What he expects in return is that we will behave towards others as he has behaved towards us. We too are expected to be loving and forgiving. In this case, Jesus is criticizing those of the Jewish faith who are trying to impose the strictest possible restraints and punishments on their fellow Jews, even as they were congratulating themselves that they were in God's good books. He is trying to remind them that they themselves owe everything to God. Beneath this veneer of lawfulness, they actually know that God has saved his people on countless occasions. Especially, they know that it was their ancestors' sins that caused their exile in Babylon, and it was God, through the intervention of a foreign nation, that forgave them and returned them to Jerusalem. The standard by which God will judge us, according to this parable, is exactly matched by God's precise fairness to the standards we impose on others. If we are strict, God will be strict. If we are considerate and merciful to others, God will be merciful to us. Thus, confusingly, each of us will be judged by a different standard, and the strictest among us will protest that this is hardly fair. To be honest, it isn't fair by their standards, but it is more than fair from God's point of view. It redresses the balance between the powerful and the powerless, between the rich and the poor, between snobs and the rest of us. And it shows God's special love and compassion, God's special love and compassion for the poor and uneducated of this world in their raw humanity. It teaches us to be merciful as our Heavenly Father is merciful. Well, tomorrow we turn to St. Luke's collection of parables, some of the best, some of the most well-known of the parables of Jesus. And the first will be the story of the Good Samaritan. And I'll see you tomorrow.